Okay, tell us about your childhood and when and where you were born and your favorite memories.
Read that question again.
Tell us about your childhood, when and where you were born and favorite memories.
The last question.
And your favorite memories.
Favorite memory? I have so many favorite memories. I don't know how I could choose one. I got lots of favorite
When
things.
you were a child.
When my child?
Tell us where and when.
Well, I was born in Manila, Arkansas, Mississippi County, 7:25 a.m. on March the 15th, 1938. And before I remembered ever living there, because I was too young, we moved to Gainesville, Arkansas, where I grew up in Greene County, Arkansas, and lived there until 1962, when I had graduated from college at Arkansas State University with a degree in accounting.
Okay.
Grandmama?
I was born in Finch, in the living room I had a bed in it, of course, of my grandmother Fletcher's home, because my parents lived with her at that point, and I was born at home on April the 15th, 1938. I don't remember a whole lot about growing up there, but I do remember a few things, and I'm not sure that I remember this from my own experience or from people telling it so often, but I have never wanted a dog, and we had a dog at that point that I don't remember even its name. I was too little, but I was sitting on a pallet in the front yard one Sunday afternoon, and the dog came in frothing at the mouth and had rabies, and they had to shoot it, and it scared my parents so bad that they would never ever have another dog. So I never had a dog growing up, and I don't have pets growing even now. We lived there until I was 3. Then we moved to Greene County, near Greene County Elementary School, and that was a written house. I remember the first electricity that we got there. It was one bulb hanging down from the ceiling, and they lit it, and they had a party that night. We had several of my parents' friends from Finch come and to see that light, that we had electricity in our house. We had behind the house there was a garden, a large garden, and I remember we had chickens always in the yard, and we had an old rooster that would, what we call, flog you. That means it would attack you. And one day my parents were working in the garden, and I was walking. I wasn't very old, but I toddled through the gate, and that rooster flogged me and jumped on me. My dad ran, and he caught that rooster, and he wrung its neck right there. I remember I liked cornflakes. We had in the kitchen we had a large wood cook stove, and the chimney was behind it. And in the wintertime, I like to sit up against that chimney and eat cornflakes because it was warm back there in the house. Wasn't always warm everywhere. We had an outdoor bathroom and a bath. When I was, I think, almost 5, my parents moved to Center Hill, rented, I'm not sure whether they owned that house. The first one we lived in, I don't think they did. I think they rented it. And that was had to be about 42 because my sister Sandra was born there. And she was born in 43, so I think it must have been 42 when we moved there. We had electricity, and we got our first refrigerator, electric refrigerator, our first electric cook stove, and we had an indoor bathroom there, which was amazing. We moved from there down the road to where my uncle and rented a house. Because I know we rented that one. It's where Uncle Joe and Aunt Lily later year bought the house and lived there. But we lived there while they were building the White House, the big house, White House on the corner. I can remember going with my dad. Sandra was small. She was a baby, and she was sickly. And I can remember, I guess, I didn't at the time think of it, but I guess Dad was babysitter because I went with him a lot. And he went out to the property where my grandmother and grandfather had lived and cut the lumber, cut the trees. My grandfather and his brother Leck helped him cut the trees. And it was in the wintertime. It was cold, and I remember we had an old green, I think it was a Ford truck, and they would load it with the logs, and Dad would take them out to the sawmill to get the lumber sawed. What I remember most was that it was, because it was in the wintertime, the soil was, I guess, wet or frozen, and we'd many times get stuck. So then they had to get the horses and drag the truck out, because I don't remember if they unloaded the logs or if they just drug the whole thing out. He took the logs to the sawmill, and the lumber was made, and then it was taken and stacked on the corner of the lot where the old White House was built. I remember they built a basement under the White House, and Peggy Shirley and Peggy's father owned the store next door that, well, actually Mother and Dad ran it for them for I don't know how many months, but not long. And then Peggy and them lived there. And I remember we used to play on the house during the time that it was being built. And my dad would always say, "Now y'all stay out off of the floor because it wasn't solid yet, and there were holes." And he said, "Y'all might fall through." So one day we were playing, and Peggy fell through a hole into the basement, scared me to death. And I remember getting Dad, and he swung himself down through that hole. There weren't any steps or anything. He just got hold of the floor and swung down in to get her out. But she wasn't hurt. She had the wind knocked out of her, but other than that, she was up and talking again. I remember living in 47 after we had built the house. Maybe I should tell this. They had cut enough lumber that they first built the house next door and sold it. And what they got out of that house, they sold the house and I think 1 acre with it. And what they got out of it, they built their house with, the money that they received for building the other one. I don't think they went in debt for any of it. My dad always said that if he didn't have the money to buy it, he didn't need it. And as far as I know, they never went in debt for anything. But I'm not certain of that. But that was his philosophy. So they built the little house and sold it, and then they used that money to build the old white house. And we lived there, well, we lived there all through my high school, but I don't remember what year they sold it. But we went to Center Hill Church, Baptist Church. Dad was a deacon, Mother was a Sunday school teacher. And on Sunday, it was a time when they didn't have restaurants everywhere. So we would have preachers come in many times just to preach that one day, visiting preachers. And my dad was a deacon, and he'd wait. And if no one invited the preacher to go home with him for lunch, my dad did. So we very often on Sunday we had the visiting preacher without knowing that we were going to have him. And my mother would go in. She would go out in the yard, wring a chicken's neck, pluck it, and have it on the table in about an hour and a half. Today I can't imagine that. But she did it. And let's see. I don't know what year. In 48 or 49, I guess money was tight, I don't remember. But my dad went to Michigan to get, other people were going to Michigan to get work that paid well. And he went and he stayed. We were in the White House then. And the thought was that if he got a good job, then that the family might move there. He went and he stayed, I don't know how many weeks, but he didn't stay long. And he came back and he said, I never want my family to live in conditions like that, so I'm not going back. So he didn't. And then he got a job with the Perryville Police Department. And he was there, I don't know how many years, through my high school. He worked for the police department. Later he ran for sheriff and was sheriff for 2 terms, I believe. And we lived in the jailhouse. While he was sheriff, we lived in the living quarters behind that were attached to the jail. And that was an interesting experience because we could go out of our living room area into the office of the jail, and we didn't very often, but we could. It was a large, heavy metal door between, and my sister Sandra and I were not allowed to go in there. But then the other door, one went into the living quarters from the living room, the bedroom area, and one went out on the outside porch. My mother cooked the meals for the prisoners, and she cooked. They had bologna and dried beans, soup beans, pinto beans, cornbread, a lot. But she could really cook those things, and they were good. And prisoners would ask for her beans many times. And especially the ones that were regulars. Some of them were there all the time, off and on, and so they wanted her beans and cornbread. And they got paid a certain amount for each meal they prepared. One funny thing that happened was that one day Mother had been out working in the yard, and she had just a round wash tub, and she had burned leaves in it, and that time you didn't have to have a permit to do that. She had burned the leaves, and then for some reason, I don't know what, she got in the car and back. I don't know where she was going, have no idea, but she backed the car over this tub, and it had fire in it. And she hollered for my dad, and he says, "My God, Danielle, what are you trying to do?" he got in the car and backed the thing off. But another thing, my sister and I have talked about this many times. My parents, we do not ever remember them arguing about anything in front of us. Never. Now, I'm sure they disagreed on things, but we didn't hear it, ever. And my dad would get frustrated sometimes, but he'd walk out, he'd say, "My God, Gaynell, Jesus Christ couldn't please you," and he'd walk out and just get out of the house. But they never argued. Let's see. Well, then let's see. When I graduated, after I graduated from high school, I went to work at the First National Bank, and that's where I met my husband. I was working there, and I had him there, I think, about 6 months, and we had a new employee, and it was Clifford Eubanks. And we were married in March the 22nd. I had to think about that. Not really. I had to think, was it the 22nd or the 23rd? But we were married March the 23rd, 1958.
Second.
March
22nd, 1958. That's right.
How long y'all date?
About 6 months.
Okay.
Okay. Dad went to work at Safeway, but we had planned that he had one semester of college.
No, a full year. I finished my freshman year.
And we had planned for him to try to finish, if at all possible. So after we got married, he started back to college. And the first 13 years we were married, one or both of us were in college. And I can tell you that the dollars were short during that time. But at the end, Clifford had a PhD and I had a master's degree, and that was probably the best thing that investment we've ever made. From Paragould, we moved to Fayetteville for his college. Then we moved from Fayetteville to Manhattan, Kansas. Bought our first home there. Then in 57, we moved to Murray, I believe, and we're there in 67, and we were there until 71. From 71, we moved to Troy, Alabama. We were here until Christmas Eve of 1975, and we packed up the furniture. The last thing that went in was the Christmas tree. We went to Oviedo, Florida, where we had already purchased a house. The first thing that came out of the truck was a Christmas tree. We put it up, and Tony and Margaret